Namaste and welcome to Naaree Talk, the show that gives you everything you need to overcome your limitations and live your best life. Today I'm talking to Nadine Hack. She's the CEO of Because Global Consulting. She's also the senior advisor of the Global Citizen Circle and environmental, social, and governance advocate on ethical corporations shortlist responsible CEO of the year. TAAW gave her the Lifetime Achievement Top Thought Leader Trust, and Global CEO magazine ranked her 9 of top 100 corporate social responsibility leaders. SustMeme ranks her 75 of the world's top 500 sustainability influencers. She's also the first woman executive in residence at IMD Business School, ranked number 1 global for FT by ExecEd. She advises senior business executives, heads of state, and other leaders in our organizations on clarifying goals and tackling obstacles to achieve them, with a particular emphasis on global citizenship, entrepreneurship, innovation, diversity, and inclusion. Wow, Nadine, that is probably the longest, introduction I've read for any of my guests. And
Well,
like
you asked my office to send you 2 paragraphs, so they followed your 2 paragraphs.
anyway, I didn't tell him how long the paragraph should be. Right?
Okay. You could have cut it shorter.
Okay, it's okay. It's very hard to know what to cut short because you've done so much, and like I said, you have such an illustrious career, and you are and a role model for women everywhere. Because I think young women are looking towards, looking to from the earlier generation to help them get a bearing in today's world on where they should go, what they should do.
Can I just say on that I also am looking at young women and getting my inspiration from them and by what they're doing. I'm just so moved by young women activists around the world. So I always see mentorship as a 2-directional. Like, I know they learn from me and my experience, but I learn from them and their courageous, new, pioneering ways of advancing causes in the world.
Absolutely. They, especially our teen activists today, they are huge inspiration, and
Yeah,
they're fearless. I love their life, how fearless they are.
fearless. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So yes, of course, I take inspiration from young people, and in fact, I learn from many young people nowadays because I take courses from them. Many of them are doing courses, and they are my mentors. So I'm like you said, it's a two-way
Of
thing.
course, because you've been a pioneer of online activity and
Yeah.
utilizing the internet and podcasts and this is something unusual for a woman of your generation, and I can say that because I'm older than you, so I'm not. But so it makes sense to me that you would be learning from younger people, and I really take my hat off to you for making the effort to learn these new forms of media and communication.
Thank you, Nadine. Yeah, I think it's essential today, that we learn from the younger generation, and they also take a page from whatever we've come before.
Yeah,
we stand on the shoulders of the generation before us, right? So
always and forever.
yeah. Okay, so let me get started with the questions I wanted to ask you. So tell me about your journey because you have such a fascinating career. So tell me a little bit about the journey to how you got to where you are.
So what's most interesting is that I probably had the most nonlinear life of almost anyone I know. I've served in business, government, academia, civil society, the United Nations, and yet whether consulting, coaching, teaching, or organizing, I've had a consistent focus on how to make our world better. How to make it more just. I've been an advocate of corporate social responsibility, sustainability, diversity, human rights, access to health, education, peace, and environmental security for all people. And the cohesive thread that connects all the roles that I've had is that I've always sought to create what I call connectedness, as I believe that the more people from diverse backgrounds cooperate with each other, the more likely we are to solve the enormously complex issues of our world. And in today's increasingly interconnected world, an expansive sweep of stakeholders has a direct impact on every enterprise's core business. So those that are wise enough to foster a deep level of connection with the broadest spectrum of stakeholders possible are the most successful in shaping that impact for their own greatest advantage. And fostering meaningful relationships it takes time, it takes effort, but it can transform even stakeholder animosity, whether it's internal or from an external source, from a different sector that disagrees with whatever it is you're doing. Fostering meaningful relationships actually can turn animosity into cooperation, as I detail in my TEDx that you mentioned, called Adversaries to Allies, because it describes one of the earliest multi-sector partnerships I helped facilitate in the 1970s. And it brought together prior enemies, loggers, environmentalists, and the government. You know, they all viewed each other with total suspicion for the ultimate mutual benefit of each and all of them. And as I say, if anybody's interested, they can see that story in a 13-minute TEDx. But I've done countless more of those kind of collaborative endeavors since then. And I actually was inspired to do this type of work by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision of what he called the beloved community, in which we're all inextricably interconnected. And this has been the philosophy that's guided me since the 1960s.
Yeah, right. That's amazing. I will put a link to your TED Talk so everyone can watch it. But I think
Sure, great.
that's a very that's a very unique way of doing it, because everyone, like you said, is at loggerheads with each other today. The environmentalists, even today, today also we need someone like you at the helm, because there's so much to be done in that area, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so,
There's so
so
much to be done in every area. And there's
absolutely.
genuinely no issue, whether we're talking climate change, whether we're talking health, a virus that viruses know no national borders, regional borders. I mean, everything is, our world is so utterly dependent. Any issue, supply chain questions for businesses, I mean, whatever it is that you look at, no one sector on its own has all of the knowledge, the expertise, the resources to solve it. It's only when you get different sectors to work together that they each contribute something unique, and the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes, that's right. That's absolutely true. So tell me a little bit about, can you give us some tips for, how you built your career? I mean, within the days of the pre-internet era. So,
Okay, well, how about pre-internet and post-internet?
yeah,
I'm
that'll
just
be
going
great.
to my computer just unplugged, and I don't want to lose power.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, okay, I'm back.
Don't worry.
So in all my decades of work in various sectors and multiple regions of the world, I never spent a penny on marketing.
Oh, okay.
And I'd ask people, how did you hear about me? Or why did you contact me? And I'd say from like the 1970s to the 1990s, they replied that they knew about me via word of mouth.
Okay.
And they'd say things like, so and so told me about your reputation for successful interventions, and I trust them. And then I began to notice that in the mid 2000s, I started to receive a new type of response. Like when I searched the internet for the issue we need to work on, your name always popped up first. And so I realized that my online presence was a new form for people to know about what I did and to learn about what others thought about me.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because actually from the mid 1990s, I'd been telling all my clients and all my graduate students that they needed to use the internet to amplify their message. And then I'd introduce them to others who could teach them how to use the internet. And then it was about 2007, and I woke up one day and I thought, wait a minute, Nadine, you've always been a walk the talk person. So how can you be guiding people to do something that you're not practicing yourself? And it was a real revelatory moment. And I'm far from being a digital native. I mean, I started my organizing work with index cards and shoe boxes, and before Rolodexes and mimeograph machines and manual typewriters with carbon paper. I mean, I'm not only pre-digital, I'm pre-analog. So I really had to push myself to start using online platforms.
Right.
And it only was, even though I'd been extolling it to others, it was only when I actually started to engage myself on the internet that I truly discovered the extraordinary connectivity power of it. It's and I'm just so excited to be living at this time. It's like tectonic plates are shifting. It's as significant as the the Industrial Revolution or the creation of the Gutenberg press. I mean, really, it's one of these profound new. Now, of course, we've seen that there are terrible ways that the internet and social media can be misused to create fear and hatred and division. But there's also wonderful ways that the internet allows doctors to share research and serve patients in very isolated regions of the world. I mean, that's just one of so many examples I can give. I remember when I was still living in the United States, I was on the board of Amnesty International USA, and I attended, so this is before 2009, and I attended the International Conference of Amnesty International, all of its, national chapters. And it was one of the first times I saw human rights defenders show how they were using things like Google Maps to find people in areas of need to provide humanitarian relief immediately after catastrophes, whether they were natural catastrophes or situations of conflict, and it was just like so exciting to see the possibilities.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. I mean, the kind of things you must have, the ways people have learned to use the internet, and today now drones are saving lives and a whole bunch of new technologies, right? So I think
Absolutely, and it changes
amazing.
now. It's, better than I do. It's not just changing by the year, it's changing, or the month or the week, it's changing by the hour, by the minute. I mean, it's just,
like an exponential,
absolutely exponential.
Yeah. The speed of change has become exponential because
beyond exponential, like stratospheric.
Yeah, very true. That's very true. Let me pull up my stuff. So, Nadine, tell us, what recommendations would you offer to business leaders in terms of the things that you've learned about in terms of creating allies, in terms of connecting people What recommendations would you to offer to business leaders today?
Well, let me first focus on the internet component of it, because while it's called social media, a lot of people don't understand the social part of that.
Yeah.
And instead, they use assorted platforms to just kind of do one directional broadcasting, either to sell themselves or to promote their goods and services. And in fact, to be social, you have to engage with others.
Yeah.
So on the internet, that means commenting on their posts, answering their questions, sharing their ideas in your posts and referring them, and all of the kinds of ways that you interact rather than just speak to. And there's just so much. I mean, it's so clear that anybody who's a millennial or younger really does not like to be spoken to, because they have grown up in this engaging environment, and they expect that the brands that they use and the jobs that they seek are going to interact with them, and it's going to be two directional, and in fact now it's multi-directional. And there's a Welsh proverb, and it says he, and I add she, he or she who would be a leader must be a bridge. And so what I call engagement leaders, and I've done a lot of work on engagement leadership over the past several decades, I've, both in my practice and also in my research, they really are bridges connecting divergent types of people for the advantage of each and all. And they know that by deeply engaging internal and external stakeholders in the co-creation of business initiatives or changes, that it's vital to engage them for any strategic action plan to be properly executed. I just can't tell you the number of times. I mean, I've actually said to clients, I no longer do strategic planning. And then when they go, what? I go, no, I only do strategic action planning. Because unless you consider the human dimension of how you are going to create ownership by engaging people and having them be part of the co-creation of the ideas, and that you can have the most gorgeous strategic plan in the world, it's going to sit on a shelf and gather dust. The only way that actual human beings are going to execute it in time, on budget, is if they feel engaged. And to be honest, this has always been true. This has been true long before the internet existed. People have a very fundamental need to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. In fact, when research shows that those qualities in a work environment, being seen, being heard, being validated, actually outrank in importance the compensation package. Not that the compensation package isn't important, but this is more important to workers, that they feel that their company cares about them, knows what they're doing, considers their ideas, and those companies that do it. And this was long before the internet, but now with the internet, you have just so many ways to engage people. You can engage people. You can have, as you know, we're having a Zoom call, just you and me. You can have a Zoom call with people from like every corner of the earth. And and Zoom is just one of like so many platforms in which in real time you can share ideas. There are these dashboards where people can follow each other's work in real time and give feedback anonymously, so that so that people feel free no matter where they stand in the hierarchy, and the best ideas emerge. And I feel like people who had this kind of non-territorial, expansive, open, welcoming of the best ideas. I mean, I've always said, like, even the interns in my office might have a better idea than I do about how to do something, and that's how I'm going to treat them and listen to them. And I believe people who do that have always benefited from it. Now there are just so many more ways to take advantage of garnering the insights. Now, again, with ever new platforms in multi-directional, transversal ways, this may sound daunting to anyone who's older than millennials, but the return on investment is so tremendous, and it's so worth the effort. So I really encourage business leaders, regardless of what age and what stage of their career they're at, is to find ways to engage with others and to use the internet as one of the many tools that they can to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said is very important about compensation not being as important as meeting their basic human needs, for validation and for belonging. And, those are the basic human needs that you need, that any organization needs to meet in its employees. And if you do that, if they feel like they belong, if they feel like they're validated, of course, they'll be loyal employees, like how our parents used to work for organizations for many, many years, right?
Exactly.
And they never even thought of leaving because they actually felt a sense of belonging to a certain organization. Today, it's a very different ball game, right? So
Yeah. So I have two observations on that. There was the wonderfully positive part of what you're describing about our parents' generation, and even an earlier stage of my generation, where someone could work for a company for 40 years and have a pension and have a retirement party in which they were honored and be recognized in the local newspaper, and that was the terrific element of it. The other side of the coin is a lot of those institutions were incredibly hierarchical.
true.
And also very much patriarchal in their hierarchy. So very male dominated, very white male dominated.
Right.
So that if you were not white, if you were not a man, it was much harder for you to advance at all. I mean, when we're talking about that generation, for women and people of color, the choices were like, be a nurse, be a secretary, be a domestic worker. I mean, they were quite limited. And of course, there were exceptions. There were pioneering women and people of color who just by their sheer will and character were able to break down walls and achieve positions that others, and these are the people you said, we stand on their shoulders.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I remember the movie I was watching about the Naza mathematician, right? I've
Yes,
forgotten her name. Yeah, I'm so
the Hidden Figures,
Hidden
it was the name
Figures.
of the movie. Yes,
Amazing.
exactly.
Amazing. And
Incredible. And now those stories are being told. And here's the thing, Priya, that and I know, that there were always people like that throughout all of human history.
yes.
It's just that history was written largely by white men.
Yeah, true.
And by the way, I have nothing against white men. I love white men. I'm married to a white man. In saying that I want to advance others, I don't want to diminish men.
Absolutely.
I believe that gender equity, racial equity, and all other forms of social equity in the workplace benefits everybody. I believe that men having the right to take paternity leave and be more active participants in the parenting of their children is of great benefit. It's not just women who benefit or minorities who benefit. It's everybody who benefits when we take all of the talent of all of humanity and make use of it.
Right. I mean, and today I think the young people are finding that, they're finding that even energy in the sense of feminine and masculine energy is not necessarily, kind of uh, like I'm masculine man, I'm a feminine woman. There's a whole spectrum on which we all
And I'm
are,
telling you,
right?
the whole non-binary movement,
Exactly.
which is happening today, which reflects what's always been the case, is that every single human being has within themselves a certain amount of what we call masculine traits,
Yes.
a certain amount of what we call feminine traits, a certain amount of what we call gregarious or aggressive traits, a certain amount of shy or what we call, quiet traits, and we're all such complex, multifaceted human beings. And when you tell any one human being that they just have to choose one rigid stereotype and live their whole life by the guidelines of what allegedly are the characteristics of that, you're stripping them of their humanity, and you're stripping humanity of the gorgeousness and the fullness of what each human being can contribute to it.
Yes, and our self-expression, right, as human beings. So we need to be able to express all sides, all parts of ourselves, the masculine, the feminine, all kinds of the energies, right?
Absolutely.
So tell me, Nadine, what message do you have? I mean, coming from a background where you worked in diversity and inclusion, what message do you have for the women of today? Because you're a wonderful role model they can
Mhm.
really look up to, and considering all that you've achieved, what message do you have to share with them and to take forward, into their lives?
So actually, as you know, I do a lot of different types of work in a lot of different spheres, but one of the categories that I love the most is when I help co-facilitate women's executive leadership development programs. And really what I try to do when I'm working with women, wherever they are in the hierarchy, is to find their own authentic authority and to own it and to stand firmly in it and to use clear, neutral language to convey it. This is who I am. This is what I'm worth. This is what I deserve. And this is what I expect. Because unfortunately, until we have a lot more change, there's still this very fine line that women have to walk
Yeah.
between, on the one hand, if they're too aggressive, they're perceived as being strident bitches.
Mm-hmm. I know, I've
And
heard
if
that word.
they're, yeah, and if they're too quiet, they're perceived as being, oh yeah, those wimpy women who can't really run anything because they're not assertive enough. And it's such a fine line, and we see it in politics and government and business and academia. I mean, we see it across the board. But when you stand in owning who you are, it's not like you're bragging, nor is it like you're whining or begging. It's not like you're saying, please, please, see who I, or that you're saying, oh, you don't care, or that you're being, I demand that you, when you just stand in the, this is who I am, this is what I'm worth, I know it, I expect you to know it, then it's like a dance. Because, we've been talking a lot about interconnection and engaging. Every relationship is two-way when you're talking about two individuals, you know, and every dynamic is multiple. And as long as you keep playing into someone else's narrative
Yes, right.
about you and appropriating it, then you have a part in perpetuating that. If they're treating you like a doormat and you're allowing them to treat you like a doormat, you have a responsibility. I'm not saying the whole thing is your responsibility. Yes, we have to change external structures that you know, there's so much about unconscious and conscious bias,
Yes, right.
that has to be addressed, and we need to make workplaces more family friendly, which is a big issue for women, whether that means having child care on site, flex hours. I mean, there's many things we can do in the external environment, but I really believe it's the internal landscape. When you can just know who you are and be proud of it and come forward with it, that the other person has to, well, they don't have to. What you're doing is you're giving them an invitation to perceive you differently.
You're
They may
creating the
not.
space. Yeah, you're creating the space. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. You're creating this space for an opportunity.
Yeah.
They may be too bigoted to receive it, but by just creating the space and offering the invitation, you allow them to behave differently to you.
Right.
And this is, you know, an iterative process.
Yes, all relationships work like that. Not in. I mean, marriage also works like that. Work relationships also work like that. They're always changing, and we always,
Absolutely.
you know, we always bring, both people bring something to the relationship, and we both have to take responsibility for what we bring to a relationship, right?
This is true. Totally true.
I wrote about that. I have a book called Devi to Deva. So my first chapter is Stop the Blame Game.
Oh, wonderful. I look forward to reading it. That sounds great.
I'll send you a copy.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I completely see what that, you know, that's such a powerful message to send to young women. And if you send me the link to your executive leadership programs, I'll put that in the description, so that people can sign up if you're still doing that. I think that's a wonderful thing to do, because we absolutely need women who have come before, to teach the young women, you know, how to bring themselves, the best part of themselves, to the workplace and to their relationships, right? Yeah. Okay. So Nadine, if you want to talk about anything else, you want to give us any more tips, I'm open to that. Otherwise, we can.
I'll just say the following, that, you know, where I am at this moment in my life. When I was a student activist in the social justice movements in the 1960s, I genuinely believed that we were going to completely change the world right then and there. And I saw it kind of as a sprint.
Right.
And then a couple of decades later, I began to see it as a marathon. And I realized I'd have to pace myself to be in it for the long haul.
Right.
And then a few more decades passed, and I now view it as a relay race. And while I may never see the complete fruition of gender and racial equity, economic, social, political, and human rights for all, I just have a sacred obligation, while there's still breath in me, to carry the torch forward. And as you said earlier, I've only been able to achieve what I've done because of those who came before me and you know, made a path. And as I said, the generations that are following me have achieved so much more than in some part because of what I and others have done to get us thus far, So I just intend to stay fully engaged in this very long relay race for justice. And as I said earlier, I'm utterly inspired by the millennials and, you know, the Gen Y, you can call them both, those born between like 1980, 1995, and then Gen Z born between 1995 and 2000. And now what they're calling Gen Alpha, born from 2001. I mean, we see what young teenagers are doing, and they really give me hope for the future. And that's why I'm devoting so much of my time to Global Citizen Circle, which, you know, if you do the link for that as well, would be great.
Yes, I will, absolutely.
Because it's a truly intergenerational forum in which everyone learns so much from each other and collaborates on creating constructive change. And I just feel like instead of responding in despair to the troubling trends of fear-based, divisive and territorial polarization that we sadly see happening in too many parts of our world,
Yeah.
I believe that every little bit helps. So as Global Citizen Circle Honorary Chair, Desmond Tutu, a Nobel Peace Laureate, an Archbishop Emeritus, he says, do your little bit of good wherever you are. It's all those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world. And that just mirrors what the great anthropologist Margaret Mead said when she said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Yeah. So I just plan on continuing to be a committed global citizen, and I'll keep trying to inspire others to also be global citizens.
Thank you so much for that beautiful and inspiring message, Nadine. And I'm sure my viewers are going to be absolutely, inspired and uplifted by that, and a lot of young women see themselves, in our generation. So I'm sure that is going to give them a lot of, encouragement when it comes to expressing themselves in the workplace and knowing that they're doing the right thing by speaking out and being activists, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nadine. I'll just stop the recording. Thank you for listening to Naaree Talk. Visit naaree.com and download my empowering guided meditation and work from home checklist so you can get started on your journey to emotional and financial independence. That's NAAREE.com.